upcoming Torah portion of Noah speaks about the Hamas, that the land reach a point of no future. And the Torah said that the Almighty, in our language, which is the anthropomorphic language, make up his mind to wipe out the world, to create a great flood. Obvious question is, why is that? Why the land reach a point, the inhabitants on the land, including animals, just to get rid of all of that? There is a book called Netivot Shalom. It's written by the late Rav Shalom Noach Brazovsky, who is the former Slonim Rebbe. He explained that the world reached a point of such a level of corruption that there is no future, but only to have a new genesis, a new beginning, a new creation. The rabbis go further to say that we are familiar with the 7 Noahide laws. Some of them are the prohibition against idol worshipping, illicit relation within a family, spilling blood, all of those sins which we familiar very well because we believe that the first temple in Jerusalem destroyed for that reason. It's in a way less than the sin of robbery, meaning you mean to say that just because of those sins between man and his fellow, stealing, etc., cheating, that's the result of the great flood? The rabbi said yes. The proof is that the second temple destroyed for those reasons, issues between man and his fellow, and to this very day it's still not rebuilt. So part of our study today is the manner of tshuva, meaning returning to God. When is a relatively easy way to rectify a mistake? When is a hard, and when is a very, very hard? Example, since we are in a tractate that dealing with all kind of illicit relation, which the Torah call in Leviticus 18 abomination, if someone have relation with prohibited women, for example, if someone raped a married woman and as a result they have an illegitimate child, this is something a person cannot rectify. A person can do teshuvah over things that he or she committed and regretted over that. But here it's already a result of something that created a world of illegitimacy, which have a future endless consequences. The same in a manner of stealing from many, stealing from public, not just from one person that you know clearly that money was stolen and need to be returned somehow. But how do you rectify someone who come before us and wants to do teshuvah, to repent, to return, while it is a money, for example, that's stolen from so many? So this is part of our discussion. But before we go there, the first subject we're going to continue discuss is the 3 categories of arayot. And since we have new faces every day, we are blessed, I would like to share with you some overview of the issue of arayot to make sure we all are on the same page. Again, the Torah tells us in Leviticus 18, there is a long list of abomination, of prohibited relations. First category, it's a blood relatives. Good example, it's the father with his daughter. One of that example, it's the prohibit relations between a man and his brother's wife, sister-in-law. We understand that there are categories, which is first it's a blood relative, then it's a psulei chitun, that means as act of marriage things became prohibited, such as daughter-in-law, mother-in-law. We understand the next step is, we discussed in the past, brother that came to the world while the other brother was not alive. But by the same token, the Torah gives us a mitzvah, a commandment of ייבום and וחליצה. ייבום is if there are two brothers, one of them passed, childless. The second brother, the surviving brother, have now the opposite, the mitzvah, to go and act in a manner of levirate, meaning to marry, to perpetuate the soul of the deceased by marry the surviving sister, the wife, the sister-in-law. And it looks like a conflicted sources. In one place, Leviticus 18, the Torah prohibited the sister-in-law. On the other place, in Deuteronomy 25, the Torah commanded the person to go ahead and marry her. And we explained that that go to a very specific category, which is a relation toward the father. And part of our discussion in the previous chapter is a list of 15 categories of women, meaning wife, co-wife, rivals, all kind of categories that exempt from act of ייבום, sometimes from both ייבום and וחליצה, sometimes just from ייבום but not from וחליצה, etc. Part of our previous discussion was the subject of zikah, zikat ייבום, meaning that since there is a potential of marriage between the widow, the surviving wife of the deceased, and the surviving brother of the deceased, and for our discussion we call it brothers Reuven and Shimon. Reuven's, who's no longer among the living, marry Rachel, for example. So Rachel has zikah bond, meaning it's a potential of marriage between her and Shimon. Therefore, is that considering a marriage in some manner? Because she is bonded to a future potential marriage to Shimon or not? It's a disputation. And part of that predicament is the issue that Shimon, the second brother, may did ma'amar, which means he did some manner of intent. He shows some way that he intends to marry her. And by doing so, is some sort of kinyan, some sort of act of acquisition between two partners. And he, if during that period of time, Levi was born, and now Shimon passed childless, and Levi have now potential two, which is the wife of Reuven and the wife of Shimon, while Reuven did not yet, the Reuven's wife did not levy rights to Shimon, who is already now deceased. We discussed that issue and we explained that there is a disputation. If you tell me that the wife of Reuven, Rachel, is prohibited to Levi because he's the brother who was not alive when the oldest brother passed, therefore her rival, her co-wife, is automatically became tzarat erva or not. That's part of our previous discussion. But from that point we went to the next level, which is the question of the concept of shniyot la'arayot. Shniyot la'arayot, soon you see a example, is the idea that you have second categories, such as mother of the mother, mother of the father, which is a rabbinic boundary that came as a consequence, as an addition to a biblical boundaries. And we explain that there are three categories that Yevamah can be prohibited. Yevamah meaning the widow, the wife of the former man who is no longer among the living. First category is called arayot, meaning something that is under the karet prohibition. Karet meaning the Torah said that soul shall be cut off. The second category is called aseh velo ta'aseh. It's a positive and a negative commandment, such as Kohen Gadol, the high priest, are prohibited to marry a widow. Now we ask a question: if there is a marriage of a brother of Kohen Gadol, and the brother of the Kohen Gadol married to someone and he passed, and now the Kohen Gadol went ahead and acted in a manner of levirate to his sister-in-law after she got married. And we explained yesterday that the assumption of marriage, even with no children, it's already relation, cohabitation between the two, which is a violation. The question is how we put that in what category. And the third one, it's called only with lo ta'aseh, with a negative commandment, which is only from erusinu, meaning the brother of the Kohen Gadol engaged with someone, did not marry yet, if she is considering a total widow for the manner of levirate marriage or potential marriage to a Kohen Gadol. So we explain that this category leads us to another question, which is if that applied to both ייבום and וחליצה or not. Why? Because there is a concept that called zika במקצת. Zika במקצת, and I just wrap up a lot of rabbinic writing. Zika במקצת meaning that there is some potential of bond between the two. So, in short, we are now 2 lines from the very bottom of the page. We are basically about to discuss that manner of potential relationship. Is that okay? Is that prohibited? And if you tell me it's prohibited, what type of prohibition involved with that? Page 22 lines from the bottom of the page. ביאת איתמר, ביאת כהן גדול באלמנה, רבי יוחנן ורבי אלעזר. אחד אמר אינה פותרת צרתה, ואחד אמר פותרת צרתה. Rashi tells us, אותה ואת צרתה מן החליצה וסגלה בגט. So we ask a question here when we have a act of cohabitation between the Kohen Gadol with the widow. 2 brothers, Reuven and Shimon. Shimon is a high priest. Reuven passed childless. Now the question is, if the Kohen Gadol acts in a manner of relation to Rachel, to the wife of the deceased, so does that mean that from doing so is a manner of zika or not? So Rashi, the way Rashi tells us here is the idea that you have here in a way double question. Question 1, what category you put this Kohen Gadol? 2, what happened with the co-wife? Meaning, if Reuven had 2 wives and the Kohen Gadol act or have some manner of ייבום, and he's now, since he's a Kohen Gadol, he cannot have a zikah bond to the wife, the widow. Does that mean that automatically it's exempt the co-wife or not? One said that since Kohen Gadol is prohibited to his sister-in-law, automatically exempt the other wife from that. The other one said no. One said that it's not, one said yes. So now, the point Rashi said here, which is very beautiful, he said, if the Kohen Gadol did it, he violated the law, and he acted in a manner of levirate to her, it's still taking an effect, and therefore, now at this position, neither one of them needs וחליצה. Page 21, now the Gemara elaborates on this disputation. באלמנה מן הנישואין, כולי עלמא לא פליגי דלא פטרה, דאין עשה דוחה לא תעשה ועשה. Since, biblically speaking, she is prohibited for him to have a ייבום relations, a levirate marriage, therefore, everyone agrees that if he went ahead and he violated that, so bediavad, after the fact, is a matter of acquisition, and therefore she's not exempting her co-wife. Ki plige, the disputation is almana mina erusin, that it's only a matter of, for our lucid understanding, because the concept of erusin is different than where we know it in the modern days, is the idea that a matter of engagement took place, but not marriage. Engagement, we are now in a different category. It's called love. Love meaning a negative commandment, which we treated in a more lenient than something that the Torah used the term of that soul shall be cut off, which is the strong violation, applies to marriage. Man de amar poteret, the one said that she is exempt. The other one, ate aseh v'dachei et lo ta'aseh, which is the positive commandment of ייבום override the negative one, which is a widow for Kohen Gadol. Since biblically speaking, Kohen Gadol can do a marriage, a levirate marriage, but the aval, after the fact, it can exempt the other co-wife. Uman de amar, and one said that eina poteret, that she is not exempting the rival one, lo ate aseh, v'dache et lo ta'aseh. The positive commandment cannot override the negative, kevan de efshar וחליצה. Since a person can fulfill the Torah commandment by doing a וחליצה, by redeeming the soul. And if you remember, Reish Lakish tells us that we see it yesterday when we studied that it's not a mitzvah of ייבום, because there is not any mitzvah here, so she's not exempt the tzara, meaning that she is like a widow from the nisuim, from the married, and therefore is no act of ייבום applies here, meitivei. So we see in other source that said ve'im ba'alu kanu, meaning we see earlier that bediavad, after the fact, it is a matter of acquisition, tuvta. So that's a serious refutation, because the Kohen Gadol have a cohabitation with a widow, is not exempting the other wife. Leima tehevet nami tuvta de Reish Lakish, because what Reish Lakish told us, we studied yesterday, that the mitzvah of ייבום, which is aseh, override lo ta'aseh, even there is a potential of וחליצה. So you see here that they, even bediavad, they lo kanu. Amar Reish Lakish said, ki amina ana, when I said that a positive commandment will not override the negative one, it means when one can fulfill both, heicha de mekaimei mitzvah, which is he can do it in an alternative way. Aval hacha, here, if the Yavam release her, it's not considered mitzvah. Listen carefully. וחליצה במקום ייבום לאו מצווה. Fascinating point. What they said here. They said here, the Torah tells us in Deuteronomy 25, if you have two brothers and one passed, so now the Yavam, the brother, remember him, the Shimon, he has the mitzvah of ulkachalo leisha, to marry the wife of the deceased, and the essence of the mitzvah is what? Is the idea lehakim shem, to perpetuate the name, the spirit of the deceased. Meaning, since he is not doing that mitzvah, by acting of releasing that is in that sense it's not a mitzvah. And therefore, it's not a say, it's not a positive commandment for doing וחליצה. It's a manner of releasing her. But the commandment was basically applied to perpetuating the name. So he said, that's basically the way the rabbis understand. It's a lot to elaborate. In short, there is a Reb Shimon Shkop, which was one of the luminary scholars of the previous generation, wrap it up by explaining to us those categories clearly. The question is, as we said earlier, it's zika b'miktzat, is some manner of zika bond between the two. How far you go with that sort of commitment between those two partners, if you treat it as a matter of total acquisition or not. Anyway, now we're going to a new sugya, a total new subject, and it's called shniyot la'arayot, meaning second rabbinic category of prohibited relation involved with a manner of a abomination by rabbinic boundaries. And before we go to those categories, the Gemara gives us here a introduction. The idea is, since it's considering shniyot, meaning a second category by rabbinic law, so the question is that manner of betrothal, that manner of kiddushin, is that tofes, is that take in effect or not? The way that the Tur in Even HaEzer, chapter 15, tells us that since it's a rabbinic prohibition, and someone did it, it's in some manner of kiddushin, and the person who did it needs to give her a get. Now, Amar Rabba. First we have introduction. Remez leshniyot min haTorah minayin. Since we said that shniyot, meaning a second rabbinic boundary, it's a rabbinic, we need to have some implication, place that the Torah alluded to that rabbinic boundary. Shene'emar, the Torah said to us at the very end of the list in Leviticus 18 of abomination, the Torah said, Ki et kol hato'evot ha'el asu anshe haaretz. Because of that former list of abomination, people in the land committed those list of abomination. We derive from that, ha'el kashot, nichlal de'ika rakot, u'main shniu arayot. Since we use the term of ha'el, so it means this is a stringency, meaning those strong violation. So since the Torah said those people in the land committed those abominations, those violations, we understand that there are other violations not have those severity, the one that the Torah put in the list. So the Gemara challenged that view and said, "Umay mashma de'ha'el lishna dekasheu." How do you know that that's applied to the ha'el, something that it's a grave sin? Dechtiv, because we learn in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 17, the story of the evil man, Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian king. They said, Ve'et elei haaretz lakach, and the mighty of the land, he, meaning Nebuchadnezzar, took away. So it means this is not really chayavei kritut. This is not one of the lists in the Torah of someone who committed that is in a list of that soul shall be cut off, correct, but a rabbinic violation. Leima plige de Rabbi Levi, דאמר רבי לוי, קשה עונשים של מידות יותר מעונשים של עריות. That's fascinating. It's connected to this week's parasha beautifully, and we see how the daf match with the Torah portion of Noach. Why? Because ותמלא הארץ חמס, we explained in the introduction, that applied to a gezel. Midot, meaning you have a measurement, right? Imagine someone on a gas station. Ethan will tell you, that's what he did for a living. He checked measurement in a gas station, and many times people cheated, which means you're pumping the gas and you ask yourself, something is wrong here. Did it ever happen to you? And it turns that somebody out there did not set up properly the measurement. So they said this, the Torah treated much severer than a violation of arayot, which is a illicit relation. שזה נאמר בהם אל, וזה נאמר בהם אלה. And the Gemara elaborate, אל קשה, ואלה קשה מאל. Frightening. Meaning, someone who cheated in a manner of man and his fellow, in a measurement, the Torah takes it in way much serious than someone who have illicit relation. Why? So the Gemara challenge that they said, "Gabe arayot nami aktiv ele." If you look carefully, they said at the end of the list of abomination, Leviticus 18, verse 29, "Ki kol asher ya'aseh mikol hatoevot ha'ele v'nichretu," Rashi tells us. So it means that this here, the Tosfot also say that the hay, it's an addition. So how do you know that act of measurement, meaning cheating you fellow, stealing indirectly from your fellow, the Torah treated much severely than arayot? Hahu lema'utei midot mikaret. So it means that you derive from that to exclude the sin of false measures from the punishment of a karet, meaning it is the wicked ale that instructs us to the relative gravity of the arayot transgressions. Elamai chumrayu, and this is frightening. He says, "Hane efshar b'tshuva, hane lo efshar b'tshuva." Wow, what does that mean? Literally meaning there is something that you can repent, you can return to the Lord, and it's okay, it's Yom Kippur, it's past, it's over, and there are certain things that you cannot do it, such as stealing from your fellow. God said in our language, as we study in Yomi, don't come to me before you appease your fellow. So it's a rabbinic, serious question. What is more treated in more severity? What is serious? A sin, a grave sin, that a person did, but he repent for that, or small sin, but did not repent. Why it's a serious discussion? Because as we explained, the rabbis tell us, look, we suffer from two destruction of temples. And the first one, they said, it was because of those violations, idol worshipping, etc., illicit relations, shfichut damim, spitting the blood, etc., etc. But they said, nidgala avonam, the earlier people, they reveal, they know the mistakes, they did the tshuva nidgala kitzam. 70 years later, the temple was rebuilt. Yet the second temple, it's not in a position of rebuild 2,000 years later. Why? Because people don't value those violations in the same manner. They don't understand that between man and his fellow, we still do not have Beit HaMikdash to these very days. Rashi, together with Tosfot Yeshenim, join in explaining to us two important values in Jewish ethics. Number one, they tells us in Arayot, in that list of the abomination, if you want to do teshuvah, there are certain ways that it's too late. As we explained, the moment you have a cohabitation with forbidden woman, and is a baby born, and is mamzer, it's illegitimate child, even you do teshuvah, you cannot totally rectify that mistake. There are those poskim, which again is frightening, that tells us the story of King David, which we are too small to understand, because the Gemara tells us that he was total righteous man, so we do not comprehend, we just use it as an example. When it was an issue of cohabitation of certain women, that baby died. There is a school of thought in rabbinic writing that as long as the baby is alive, the tshuva is not completed. The repentance is not there. Only by death of that child is basically the end of that bad transgressions. Yet, Rashi in Tosfot Yeshanim said there is a second category that's called gezer. A person walks for a store and he or she betrayed the owner, meaning he figured out there is no surveillance, etc., etc., and he stole, for our discussion, $100,000 from 100 people. And now he comes before us and he said, I'm so sorry, I regret it. But Eino yodea mimi gazal, he doesn't know all the list of names of people that he's stolen. It's not just that, Mr. A, I stole from him and I owe him that money. So the way the rabbi tells us is, Yitasek betzorchei rabim. He will do things voluntarily for the need of the community. So by doing so is the way of derech tikkun, the way that he can repair, tikkun olam, repair the world, but it's not a completed act of tikkun. Why? It's called lo tikkun me'al yata. It's not full manner of tikkun, because eventually you don't return the money to each and every person that was stolen. It's rabbinic way of giving a path of teshuvah to everyone. But it's still, as we see, in a certain manners, even with act of teshuvah, it's not there yet. The Rambam in Ilchot Teshuvah elaborates and he says that even in a manner of teshuvah, and even sometimes in a manner of yisurim, God forbid, manner of a person suffer, and Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and there are certain manners that only mitah mechaperet, that death of a person can total atone, which again, it's above our understanding, because in Judaism in general, we believe in teshuvah, we believe that the door is always open for a person to repent and regret and repair, but again and again, there are different categories. That's our discussion. Now we have another implication to shniyot, to the prohibition of second level. Rav Yehuda Amar Me'acha. They said in a book of Proverbs, chapter 12, they said about King Solomon, Ve'izen vechiker, tiken meshalim harbe. They said that King Solomon came in, and besides being wise, Kohelet, King Solomon, he made handles. Handles is for sure euphemism, meaning he put an addition. It's like you have a jar, you have something you carry, and you have handles that you carry those, right? So he said that's the addition that he formulated in order for us to do the thing in the highest level of spirituality. ואמר אולה, אמר רבי אלעזר, קודם שבא שלמה הייתה תורה דומה לכפיפה שאין לה אוזניים, עד שבא שלמה ועשה לה אוזניים. Meaning, again, it's using a manner of euphemism. Up to the moment of King Solomon, the Torah was, in a simple language, as a dry laws. Now Solomon came in and he had the addition which called shniyot la'arayot, the second degree of list of abomination, such as soon you see mother of the mother, mother of the father, etc., etc. So therefore it creates another boundary, another distance. So therefore there's more a handler to the Torah to act in the spirit of teaching of Torah in the proper way. Another remez, another implication to the boundary of shniyot, of second degree, Rabbi Oshaya Amar Me'acha. There is written in the book of Proverbs, chapter 4, Pra'ehu al ta'avor bo, ste me'alav va'avor. He said, rejected, do not pass it, veer away from it, and pass on. Meaning, using a euphemism to tell us from this book of Proverbs that we have a rabbinic extra boundary at avoiding someone from mistaken. For our better understanding, imagine, especially you, Gilbert, you have an area that it's a dangerous area, involved, for example, of nuclear proliferation, or area that it's a poison dangerous zone. You put a sign all over the area, okay? You put electrical fence around those area, but then you put another fence for those fences with a huge sign, don't even come close to this area, okay? So the second fence carries a lot of weight because, yes, it's not electrical fences, but it's still an important fences that wants you to stay away from certain things. That's his point. Amar Ravashi, Mashal de Rabbi Yashaya lema davar dome. Explain to me this allegory. Le'adam meshamer pardes. If you own a valuable piece of property, meshamro mibachutz, kulo mishtamer. If you put a fences outside of your domain, of your property, you safeguard your property. Meshamro mibefnim. If a person already entered the property and now you want to make sure that he or she is not touching certain trees, שלפניו משמר, שלאחריו אינו משתמר. So here you already have the person there, so the area that is before him is guarded, but the area that is behind him is not guarded. So therefore the sages came in and says, wait. You know what? Don't let the person even come to that property. Put another fence and that's it. That's basically the Aruch Laner is a book that explains to us how should we treat it. The Gemara rejected that allegory and they said, "V'had Rav Asher b'dutai hatam shel fanav mi hamishtamer hacha ilav shniyot paga be'erva gufa." He says, if you don't have the shniyot, the original one, it will be in any event guarded. But the second one could very well encounter a Torah forbidden women to himself. Another source, meaning we need to have another decree in addition to what Rav Ashi bring us as an explanation, allegorical explanation. Rav Kahana Amar Mehacha Ushmartem et mishmarti, the Torah said in Leviticus 18, you should safeguard mishmarti, mishmarti meaning my charge. What does that mean? Asu mishmeret lemishmarti, put another boundary. Amar le'abayili Rav Yosef, ha deoraita hi. You have to differentiate between biblical versus rabbinic, because the way that Rav Kahana tells us is that commandment to have mishmeret, to have a guard to abomination, is biblical. So why he said that it's implication to that decree of second rabbinic level, he says the oraita or pirshu rabbanan. It's a biblical, but the rabbis came in and interpreted all the other commandments. So he said, Kol HaTorah nami pirshu rabbanan. He said he interpreted the whole Torah. Ela midrabbanan ukra asmachta be'alma. Wow. So they said that is a strong rabbinic prohibition, and they put the support for implication of the Torah. Sabah al-Khair Akhuya. So now, after we have this introduction, now we go to the details. What's involved with shniyot? Tanu Rabbanan, ma'im shniyot? What is this rabbinic decree of second level? Imo, the mother of his mother. Meaning, this is not part of the list in Leviticus 18. It's rabbinic second level of prohibited relations. Imo ve'em aviv, the mother of his father. Ve'eshet avi aviv, the wife of the father of his father. And the wife of the ve'eshet avi imo, the father of his mother. Ve'eshet achi ha'av min ha'em, the wife of the brother of his father from the mother. Ve'eshet achi ha'av ha'em min ha'av, the wife of the brothers of the mother from their father. Ve'kalat bno, kalat bno, it's isurei chitun, which means that it's erva biblically, right? The wife of his son. But the kalat bno, it's, Rashi said, it's an addition to that, because it's kalato. The next one is vechalat bito, the kalat bito, meaning the wife of that come out of son of his daughter. Umutar adam be'eshet chamiv, so a person is permitted to enter into marriage with his father-in-law's wife, ube'eshet chogo, and the wife of his wife's son, ve'asu bevat chogo, and he is prohibited to marriage with the daughter of his wife's son. Ve'chogo mutar be'ishto uvito, and the one's current wife's son is permitted to enter into marriage with the stepfather's former wife and his daughter from another marriage. Ve'eshet chogo omeret lo, ani muteret lecha ubiti asura lecha, and the wife of one and the former wife of the one's wife's son may say to him, I am permitted to you, and my daughter is forbidden to you. So you see here, to have former husband's stepfather. So the Gemara asks, Bat chogo deoraitai, what are you talking about? The daughter of one's wife's son is a Torah law, is one of the arayot. Why? The Torah said in Leviticus 18, verse 17, Et bat bena ve'et bat bita. The Torah said her, meaning the wife's, the one's wife's son's daughter, and her daughter's daughter is prohibited. So therefore, why the Braita said here that this is part of the second level of arayot, mishum de kaba'ei lemitnei seifa, because we need to understand the last letter clause of the Braita. They said here, Eshet Chogo omeret lo, the wife of one's wife's son may say to him, Ani muteret lecha, ubiti asura lecha. I am permitted to you, but my daughter not. Mi deoraita, it's biblically, it's a bat chogo, the daughter of the step. Bedidi, in my situation, in my case, lo gazur berabanan. The rabbis did not decree a prohibition. So therefore, that self-same Torah prohibition against marrying this woman daughter, the daughters of one's wife's son. So the Tana come to teach us, and that's the way Nachmanides explained to us in his commentary on the Torah, that the Tana come here to teach us that even though the daughter of the step one is biblical, the mother of the step one allow even by the rabbinic, and it's not part of the decree of bita, of the daughter. Ihachi, Gemara said, if that's so, the Tana wishes to show a case involved with rabbinic restraint, then Eshet Chamiv Nami Tema. You can say that that's applied to wife of the in-law. Ani muteret lecha, I permitted to you by the rabbinic law. Ubiti asura lecha, yet my daughter is prohibited to law biblically. The havya achot ishto, because she is the wife, the sister of his wife. An example, that's the way Rashi tells us. A man, let's call him Reuven, he married Rachel, and they have a daughter, let's call her Tamar. Now, this Tamar marry Moshe, all right? Then, when this wife Rachel passed away, Reuven married another one, let's call her Sarah, and they have a daughter, let's call her Dinah, meaning that this one, which is the wife of Moshe, you remember her? What is her name? Tamar. She and Dinah are sisters from the father. It means that the wife of Reuven can say, which is the in-law of Moshe, she can say, after Reuven passed, or after Reuven divorces her, I allow to you, because a person allowed to marry the wife of the in-laws, even though my daughter, that it's the sister of the father of your wife, prohibited to you biblically, because the Torah said, Ve'isha el achota, the woman and her sister, lo tikach, you cannot marry. So if that said, why, the question is, why the Tana did not brought upon us the idea of the daughter of the wife of the in-law, meaning that is allowed here even by the rabbinic law. Ha-psikale, ha-lo-psikale. So the answer is, they said that the case of one's wife's son's daughter was clear-cut, was lucid, one from the Tana, and so he taught it. But the case of daughter of one's father-in-law's wife was not a clear-cut one for the Tana, and therefore he did not teach it. Now, since we have the idea of shniyot, or the second degree, we have to know if that's applied to a previous generation or only the forthcoming generation. So here we have 4 categories. Amar Rav, Arba Nashim yesh lahem efsek. 4 categories of women among the second level of arayot have, in a way, a stop sign for that prohibition, which means the sages put that boundary to that generation, but not the generation before them or the generation after them. Versus the other level of shniyot is incessant, it's not stop, it's forever lasting. Now the Gemara elaborate. Nakit Rav beyadei tlat. So it means Rav, when he studied it, he have only 3 and not 4. Which are they? Eshet achi ha'em mina av, the wife of the mother's paternal brother. So that's the way Rashi tells us, that here they have this boundary. Next one is ve'eshet achi ha'av mina em, the wife of the father's maternal brother. Vechalato, and one daughter-in-law. Daughter-in-law, it's Torah, it's a biblical erva. And the Gemara explain why I mentioned that in that category of arayot. Later we see it. Uz'iri mosif, and Ze'iri, it's a great sage, adds also af eshet avi imo. It's also a secondary erva to one's mother's father wife, as the 4th case where you have these generational limitations were imposed. And Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak wants to make our life easy, so he brought an acronym, mnemonic, vesimanich, he called it the Ilai derav, a secondary erva that it's above the generation of Rav, because Rav gives us the least, the wife Eshet Achia Em Me'av, Eshet Achia Av Mina Em, which is the generation of the father and the mother, and Ze'iri adds Eshet Avia Em, which is a next generational boundary. V'Rav Ma'itama Lo Chashiv Le, why Rav not counted the 4th one? Michalfalei be'eshet achi aviv. Rav exchanged it, or you can say confused it, in the case of one's father's wife, which means that he holds that it's non-stop, because people can confuse with the wife of the father, and therefore, since the din, the halacha is not so, because the future generation is called part of the erva, part of the arayot, biblically speaking. That's the way Rashi tells us. Uzeiri, so why Zeiri is not concerned of people confused with the wife of father of his mother with the wife of the fathers of the father. He says, Lehatam shchiach ve'azil, lehacha lo shchiach ve'azil. He said, you have to know that in the usual, a person regularly goes there to visit his father's family, but does not regularly goes here to his mother's family. So as a result of that, Rashi said, he is more involved with relationship with relative forbidden to him on his father's side than of the forbidden relations to his mother's side. So there is no reason to fear that he will mistakenly presume, Rashi said, that his father's wife is likewise permitted. 21b, Kalatcha deoraita hi dechtiv ervat kalatcha lo tegale. The Torah tells us in Leviticus 18, line 15, the nakedness of your daughter-in-law you should not uncover. So again, the question back to our point that why Rav did not have her as part of the second level of arayot, that it's no hefsek. The idea here that this Rav meant to say kalat bno, the one's son's daughter-in-law. So second, kalat bno, the daughter-in-law, the wife of his son, it's one of the list of shniyot, of second degree of arayot. So it said, v'kalat bno yesh la hefsek, v'atanya kalato erva, kalat bno shniya, וכן אתה אומר בבנו ובן בנו עד סוף כל הדורות. So it means that it's no hefsek between them. So אלא אימה kalat bito. Why? Because Rashi said it's not part of the isur kala deoraita. Said דאמר רב חיסדא, המילתא מגברא רבא שמיע לי. ומנו Rabbi Ami. I heard that from a great man, Rabbi Ami, who said, לא אסרו כלה. So Rabbi Ami, Rashi said, not specified which one is. לא אסרו כלה, אלא מפני כלה. Only for the kala, which is the prohibition of the daughter-in-law. ואמרו לי כלדאי, כלדאי, it's those who, astrologers or people who can prognosticate the future. מלפני הבית, מלפנה הבית, that you will be a great sage. אמינה, אי גברא רבא בינה הסברת מדעתי. אי מקרא דרדא כאבינה, שאלי מרבנן דעתו לבי כנישתא. So I explain in my book, ביורה כלומר ברש"י על הש"ס. Rashi said here, אי חי מלפנה דאמרו לי גברא רבא בתלמוד משמע הסברה, I'm just reading the Rashi. הסברה להדי רבי עמי לא אסרו כלה מדעתי ולא אשלם בית המדרש. ויאב מלפנה מקרא דרדא כאוב לא תלמיד השליד מרבונן, כלומר, היה צריך לשאול דלא אבינה מדעתי. So here we don't understand what does that mean, the whole concept of, okay, the first question is why are you asking those astrologers? It's the Torah said in Leviticus 18, Tamim ti'eim Hashem Elokecha, you should be wholehearted with Hashem. So what does that mean? It's a book called Einaim LaMishpat that he explained what exactly happened. Meaning the prohibition is, in short, is to ask, but if they already tell them, you're allowed to consider that. But I think Rashi meant in this klomar that Rav חיסדא meant for the future, meaning if he can explain Rabbi Ami midato, it's because he's Gemarrah Rabbi. Milfana meaning Gemarrah Rabbi. So if not, so it's mikre dardake. So because he is merited to explain by himself in his own de'ah, so he's a Gemarrah Rabbi, and I elaborate in my book over that. Anyway, Gemarrah Rabbi avena asbar midate mikre dardake avena ashel merabanan le'at le'bei knishta. So, and they will explain to me. Aruch Laner elaborates on that. Hashta svarta midati lo asru kalat bito ela mishum kalat bno, because the considering of the wife of the son of his son, that's applied to a future generation of kala. Amar le'abaye le'rava asber alach kegon kalata devei bar tzaitai. It's an example that she was the daughter-in-law of the sons and daughter-in-law of the daughter. So if you allow the daughter-in-law of the daughter, people will mix her with the daughter of his son. Rav Papa amar kegon kalata devei Rav Papa bar Abba. Rav Ashi amar kolata devei Rav Mari ba'asik. Again, this is the cases that apply to both. So Ritva is explaining also the Meiri said that that's the common mistake that people mix the two. Tosfot also said that this each Amorah brings an example of someone that lived at his time. Ibayalu, since we talk about Eshet Ach Av, Eshet Ach Em Me'av, so that's considering Shniyot. Eshet Achi Ha'em Min Ha'em Ma'u. So is that considering Shniya or not? So maybe Ritva said that that's a late Gzerah that applies to a future generation. It's also the way that Tosfot understand it. So here they explain the quandary, the dilemma. Eishet achi av min ha'em ve'eishet achi ha'em min ha'av de'ika tzad av hu de gazru rabanan. Meaning the first case is the wife of the brother of the father. Second one is the wife of the brother of the mother from the father. Who the gazru abanan, because it's considering shniyot, it's very similar, it's domeh to ach av mea av, that is total erva by the biblical term. Rashi said that it's a two tzdadim, it's both sides. I wish to have more time. Avalecha deleika tzad av, lo gazru bu abanan, odilma lo shna. So Rav Safra hikuf gzera v'nigzor gzera legzeira, You don't add another decree. אמר רבא אתו כולו לאו גזירה לגזירה נינו. אימו ערווה, אם אימו שנייה. The mother is clear part of the blood. So that's for sure, it's considered arayot. The next one, that's the way Rashi explained. Next one is the em imo, the mother of the mother. That is samuch le'erva. So it's a concern that he yifga ba'erva. The Gazwal, the sages come up and put a decree al em aviv, the mother of his father, which means that you go by the generation before her, but not the future generation. That's the way Rashi said. Mishum emimo v'tamamai. The reasoning, kulu deve'ima rabati karulei. It's like called Safta, the grandma. Safta can be, I have it in my wife's family, they have for a long time Safta Rabba, Saba Rabba, which means that they have several generations up. It's a matter of fact that for a long time, Bli Ayin Hara, without any Ayin Hara, right? My wife's was a grandmother, but she was also a granddaughter. Meaning her grandmother merited to see the daughter of her daughter, of her daughter, of her daughter, which is basically what is the sixth generation, right? Anyway.
Great-great-grandmother, yeah.
Great-great-great-mother. Okay. אשת אביו ערווה, אשת אבי אביו שנייה, וגזרו על אשת אבי אמו משום אשת אבי אביו. ותמה מאי? כולו דבי אבא רבא קראו לי. So they're all calling the wife of the grandpa, wife of the Zaidi, right? So it means it's only one decree not to have relation with the wife of the grandfather. Another example, אשת אחייו מן האב, I wish to have more time, אשת אחייו מן האב ערווה, אשת אחייו מן האם שתייה, וגזרו על אשת אחי האם מן האב, משום אשת אחייו מן האם ותם המים, משום דחולו דבידו דקראים לו. It's the wife of the uncle. מאי? So how you explain that dilemma? So תשמע, דחיית הרב יהודה בר השאלה, אמר אבו מערבה, כל שבן קיבה ערווה, פימל, it's considered ערווה, בזכר, גזרו על אשתו משום שנייה. So soon the Gemarrah explained what is that mean. אמר רבא וכללו, it's a general principle. It's חמותו ערווה, the mother-in-law, it's ערוות ובאישה וביתה, that's the mother-in-law, לויטיקוס 18:17. אשת חמיב מותרת לו, the wife of his father-in-law allows even by the rabbinic way. So it means the Tosfot and the Rashba and the Ritva say that the wife of his father-in-law or step one, it's not part of that decree, rabbinic decree. Bait Chamoto, the daughter of his in-law, Erva, אשת בן חמותו מותרת, בת חמיב ערווה, אשת בן חמיב מותרת, חורגתו ערווה, as said in the Torah. Now, meaning the daughter of his wife from a previous marriage, it's abomination. Eshet chorgo, so muteret, even by the rabbinic. But choragto erva, eshet ben chorgo muteret. To show you all those cases, that they're a little different between them. Veha, amar Rav Yehuda bar Shela, the Rav Yehuda bar Shela laitu emai, לאו לאיתו אשת אחיה מן האם, דכל שבנקבה ערווה, בזכר גזרו על אשתו משום שנייה. מה ישנה ומה ישנה? בחד קידושים מקרב לה, דאיקה תרי קידושים מקרב לו.
יחם לשולוים מלאכי השולוים מלאכי